In a quiet, forgotten corner of the city, a gang of racist men, emboldened by their numbers and ideology, surrounded a lone black woman in a wheelchair. To them, she was an easy target, vulnerable, powerless, and isolated. But they had no idea who they were dealing with. Beneath the surface of their assumptions lay a truth that would unravel their entire operation. She wasn't just a woman in a wheelchair. She was a former Special Forces operative, a strategist with years of experience dismantling threats far greater than this hate-fueled gang. By the time they realized their mistake, their network would be shattered, their leaders unmasked, and the silent fear gripping the community would be replaced with a newfound strength. This isn't just the story of one woman standing her ground. It's a story about the unyielding force of justice, the power of resilience, and how a single act of courage can dismantle hate at its core. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe. The wheels of Ava James's customized titanium wheelchair hummed softly as they rolled over the cracked, uneven pavement. The night was quiet, too quiet for this part of the neighborhood. The dim glow of streetlights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows that danced across graffiti-covered walls. The air was heavy with the scent of rain that lingered, but never fell. Ava adjusted her gloves and tightened the strap of her bag, her sharp instincts on high alert. Years in the Special Forces had trained her to listen to the silence, to recognize the unspoken signals of danger, and tonight, everything about the stillness screamed trouble. She noticed the first figure before he even stepped fully into view. He emerged from the shadow of a parked van, his tall, broad frame blocking her path. His shaved head gleamed under the flickering light, and his posture was confrontational, deliberate. "Well, well," he drawled, a cruel smirk curling his lips. "What do we have here? Out for a little midnight roll, are we?" Ava stopped her wheelchair, her hands steady on the rims. Her eyes narrowed as she took him in. The hate tattoo on his neck, the steel-toed boots, the way he rested a hand casually on his belt. Behind him, 3 more men emerged, spreading out like a pack of wolves. "You lost or something?" one of them sneered. He was lanky, with a jagged scar running down his cheek. His tone was mocking, his eyes full of malice. "Maybe she's just sightseeing," another chimed in, his voice thick with derision. This one was stockier, his arms covered in poorly inked tattoos. He chuckled darkly. "Bet she doesn't see streets like this where she's from." Ava's jaw tightened. She remained silent, her gaze sweeping over the group as she calculated. These weren't just random thugs. They were organized, purposeful. Their boots, their tattoos, their confident smirks all told a story she'd seen too many times before. The leader stepped forward, his presence commanding. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue?" he asked, tilting his head mockingly. "Or are you just too slow to keep up? Guess that's what happens when you let someone like you out in the wild." Ava's lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't answer. Her silence only seemed to egg them on. "Look at her," the lanky one said, circling her slowly like a predator stalking prey. "All proud and defiant, like she's got something to prove. Newsflash, sweetheart. No one's impressed." "Yeah," the stocky man added, crossing his arms. "What are you even doing out here? Shouldn't you be somewhere safe? Maybe begging for scraps or waiting for someone to feel sorry for you?" The leader laughed, the sound harsh and grating. "Oh, she thinks she's tough," he said, turning to his friends. "Rolling around like she's better than us, like she's got the right to be in our neighborhood." "Right to be here?" the scarred one echoed, his voice rising. "She doesn't belong here. None of them do. They've got no place here, acting like they own everything." The words hit like a slap, their meaning as sharp as a knife. Ava's hands gripped the armrests of her chair, her expression calm but her mind racing. "Probably thinks that fancy chair makes her special," the stocky man sneered, stepping closer. "Makes her untouchable. But let me tell you something, lady. You're not special. You're just another black woman who doesn't know her place, coming around here like you're welcome. You people think you can take over everything, but not here. Not in our neighborhood. And you've got the nerve to act like you're one of us? The leader spat, his voice rising with anger. Like you're equal? Let me make one thing clear. You're not. You and your kind don't belong here. You come in, trying to act like you own the place, and we're sick of it. You should have known better than to show your face around here. Ava's pulse remained steady, her breathing controlled. She'd heard worse, faced worse. These men had no idea who they were dealing with, and she wasn't about to let their words get under her skin. The lanky one crouched beside her, his face uncomfortably close. What's the matter? You deaf? Or maybe you're just scared. You should be. Yeah, the stocky man added, cracking his knuckles. Because no one's coming to save you. You're all alone out here. Just you and us. And we've got plans. The leader stepped even closer, looming over her. Here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna turn that little chair around and roll your crippled ass out of here. Because if you don't, he let the threat hang in the air, his cruel smile widening. Ava met his gaze, unflinching. Is that so? She said, her voice calm, even. The men froze for a moment, caught off guard by her composure. She's got guts, the scarred one muttered. Stupid, but gutsy, not guts, the leader replied. Just too dumb to know when she's beat. Typical. Ava's eyes flicked over their faces, memorizing every detail. She didn't need to answer their taunts. She didn't need to explain herself. All she needed was time. Time to plan. To act. The stocky man sneered. You think this is a game? You think your attitude is gonna save you? The lanky one laughed, circling her again. Maybe we should teach her a lesson. Show her what happens when you roll where you don't belong. Yeah, the stocky one agreed. Make sure she doesn't forget who's in charge around here. The leader leaned in, his voice low and menacing. You've got two choices. Leave or stay, and find out just how bad it can get. Ava's expression didn't waver. Inside, the fire burned brighter. These men thought they were predators, but they were nothing more than fools playing a dangerous game. She had faced men like them before, men who thought strength came from numbers, from intimidation. They had no idea what was coming. The streetlights above flickered, their light casting uneven shadows across the cracked pavement. The night felt colder now, the tension tightening like a noose. Ava's hands rested on the rims of her wheelchair, her body still, but her mind racing with calculations. The men had tightened their circle, a deliberate show of dominance, their taunts growing sharper with each passing moment. You know, the lanky one began, his scar gleaming in the dim light as he leaned closer. I've seen plenty of your type before, always acting like you're so tough. Like you're better than everyone else. But when push comes to shove, you're just like the rest. Helpless. Helpless, the broad one echoed, his voice heavy with mockery. Look at her. She's literally sitting down on the job. He let out a laugh that grated on Ava's ears, the kind of laugh that was meant to belittle, to degrade. She's not just helpless, the scarred man continued, a twisted grin spreading across his face. She's hopeless. Sitting here, thinking she can outstare us. Like that's gonna save her. Nah, she's already lost. Ava let her eyes move between them, her expression unreadable. Her calm only seemed to enrage them further. You think you're tough, don't you? The leader sneered, crouching down to her level, his icy gaze locked onto hers, his lips curling into a cruel smile. Sitting there like you've got nothing to fear. But let me tell you something. Fear is a good thing. Fear keeps people in line. And people like you should be terrified right now. The lanky man walked behind Ava's wheelchair, his footsteps slow and deliberate. But she's not scared, he said, almost in wonder. Look at her, sitting there all high and mighty, like she's above us. Above us, the broad one said, his voice rising. She's below us in every way that matters. Physically, mentally, hell, even socially. She doesn't belong here. Doesn't belong anywhere, the scarred man added, laughing bitterly. Probably one of those people who spends all day demanding respect without earning a shred of it. The leader straightened up, towering over Ava again. Respect? That's a good one. You think you deserve respect? He shook his head, his expression darkening. Let me tell you how respect works. It's earned through power, through control, and right now, you've got neither. Ava tilted her head slightly, her voice calm when she finally spoke. Is that what this is about? Power? Control? Because from where I'm sitting, all I see are 4 insecure men trying way too hard to convince themselves they matter. Her words landed like a slap. The leader's smirk disappeared, replaced by a flicker of rage. The other 3 exchanged glances, their bravado cracking for the briefest moment. You've got a real smart mouth, the leader said, his tone low and dangerous. But that mouth's not gonna save you. Not here. The broad man stepped closer, his boots scraping against the pavement. You keep talking like that, and you're gonna regret it. We've got ways of dealing with people like you. Ways? The lanky one said, his grin widening. Oh yeah, we've got plenty of ways. But first, maybe we should take her down a peg. Show her what happens when you mess with the wrong people. The scarred man crouched beside her, his voice dropping to a whisper. What's it like, sitting there, knowing you can't do a damn thing to stop us, knowing you've already lost? Ava's gaze shifted to him, her voice steady. What's it like, knowing you're so desperate for power that you need to gang up on one woman to feel strong? The scarred man's grin faltered, and he stood up abruptly, his jaw tightening. You think you're funny? Keep talking. See where it gets you. Enough! The leader snapped, raising a hand to silence the others. He leaned down again, his face inches from Ava's. You think you're clever, don't you? But clever doesn't mean a damn thing when you're outnumbered. You've got no backup. No way out. Just you and us. He straightened, nodding to the broad man. Grab the chair. The broad man reached down, his meaty hand brushing against the armrest. Ava's body tensed, but she didn't move. Not yet. See? The lanky one said, laughing. Not so tough now, are you? All that attitude? And for what? You're nothing. Less than nothing, the broad man added, gripping the armrest tighter. Just another... Enough! Ava's voice cut through the air like a whip, sharp and commanding. The men froze, their laughter dying as they turned to stare at her. Even the leader paused, his head tilting slightly in surprise. Ava's eyes moved between them, her gaze cold and unflinching. You've been talking a lot about what I can't do, about how helpless I am, but here's the thing. You don't know me. You don't know what I'm capable of. And that ignorance? It's going to cost you. The silence that followed was thick, oppressive. The leader recovered first, his lips curling into a sneer. Big words for someone in your position. Let's see if you can back them up. He nodded again, and the broad man tightened his grip on the armrest, a cruel grin spreading across his face. Let's find out how tough you really are. Ava's hands tightened on the rims of her wheels, her body coiled like a spring. The moment had come. She had waited, calculated, and now she was ready. The first man moved. The broad man roared like a bull, grabbing Ava's wheelchair from behind, lifting its back wheels off the ground in an attempt to immobilize her. Ava's fingers tightened on her baton, her mind working rapidly. She twisted her torso and jabbed the tip of the baton backward, striking his knuckles with a sharp crack. He let out a guttural yell, dropping the chair as he stumbled back. But there was no time to breathe. The lanky man darted in from her left, his long arms reaching for her baton. Ava spun her chair sharply, the motor humming, and the baton swung in a wide arc. It connected with his wrist, the impact sending a jolt through her arm and his hand flying open. He let out a sharp cry, clutching his arm. But Ava wasn't done. She jabbed the baton into his ribs, forcing him to stumble back, wheezing. The scarred man wasn't far behind. He had grabbed the chain he'd dropped earlier and swung it in a vicious arc toward Ava's head. She ducked just in time, the chain whistling past her ear. Before he could recover, Ava drove her baton into his knee with a brutal strike. The man grunted in pain, but he stayed upright, his rage fueling his determination. He swung the chain again, this time aiming for her legs. The chain wrapped around one of her wheels, yanking it to the side. Ava's chair skidded slightly, but she acted quickly, twisting the motorized controls and spinning the chair sharply. The sudden movement dislodged the chain from the wheel, and Ava used the opening to strike upward, hitting the scarred man in the chin with the baton. His head snapped back, and he staggered, blood trickling from the corner of his mouth. "Lesson 2, Ava said coldly, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Don't bring brute force to a battle of skill." The leader, who had been hanging back, stepped forward now, his knife glinting in the dim light. His expression was dark, his earlier arrogance replaced with cold fury. "You think you've got this under control?" he snarled. "You're just a cripple in a fancy chair. You don't stand a chance." Ava's eyes flicked to him, her grip tightening on her baton. "I've already beaten you," she said simply. "You just don't know it yet." The leader lunged, the knife slashing toward her midsection. Ava spun her chair, narrowly avoiding the blade. He followed up with another strike, faster this time, but Ava parried it with her baton. The knife clanged against the steel, the sound echoing in the narrow alley. The leader pressed the attack, slashing and stabbing with precision, but Ava's movements were fluid, calculated. She blocked each strike, waiting for her opening. It came when he overextended, his knife arm swinging wide. Ava drove her baton into his wrist, forcing him to drop the blade. She followed up with a strike to his shoulder, the impact knocking him off balance. The leader stumbled, but before Ava could finish him, the broad man came charging in again. He grabbed the side of her chair, his massive hands gripping tightly as he tried to tip it over. Ava braced herself, planting the baton against the ground to steady the chair. She twisted sharply, using the motorized controls to spin the chair and break his grip. The movement sent the broad man staggering, and Ava struck him in the back of the knee with her baton. He crumpled to the ground with a howl of pain. "You're going to regret this," the lanky man shouted, rushing at her again. He picked up a loose piece of wood from the ground and swung it downward, aiming for her head. Ava ducked, the wood splintering as it hit the back of her chair instead. She countered with a quick strike to his shin, followed by another jab to his ribs. The lanky man fell to the ground, groaning. The scarred man, blood dripping from his lip, was back on his feet, wielding the chain once more. He swung it with both hands, aiming low this time, trying to trip her up. The chain wrapped around the base of her chair, and he yanked hard, pulling her off balance. Ava's chair tilted dangerously, but she steadied herself, using her baton to strike the chain and loosen his grip. She spun her chair sharply, the motor's hum growing louder, and the chain slipped free. Ava drove her chair forward, ramming into his stomach with the reinforced front panel. The impact sent him sprawling onto his back. The leader, now weaponless but still dangerous, advanced again, his fists clenched. He grabbed for her baton, but Ava was ready. She let him get close, then spun her chair to the side, using the movement to pull him off balance. She struck his thigh with the baton, and he dropped to one knee, cursing. The leader's frustration boiled over. "You idiots! Surround her! Now!" The men obeyed, spreading out to encircle her. The broad man picked up a discarded trash can lid, using it as a makeshift shield. The lanky man grabbed another piece of wood, while the scarred man, still holding the chain, moved to block her escape. The leader stood in front, his fists raised. "You're not getting out of this," the leader said, his voice low and menacing. "We're ending this now." Ava's breathing was steady, her eyes darting between the men. She could feel the tension in the air, the weight of their desperation. They were tired, hurt, but they weren't giving up. And neither was she. The broad man charged first, using the trash can lid to shield himself. Ava wheeled backward, her baton striking the edge of the lid with a loud clang. The broad man pressed forward, trying to force her against the wall, but Ava twisted her chair to the side, driving the baton into his exposed side. He grunted, dropping the lid as he stumbled. The lanky man followed, swinging his piece of wood wildly. Ava deflected the blows with her baton, the wood splintering with each strike. She countered with a sharp jab to his wrist, forcing him to drop the weapon, and followed up with a strike to his knee. The lanky man collapsed, clutching his leg. The scarred man swung his chain again, the metal glinting in the faint light. Ava ducked, the chain whistling past her ear, and spun her chair to face him. She grabbed the chain mid-swing, yanking it from his hands, and struck him across the face with her baton. He fell to the ground, blood streaming from his nose. The leader, now the last man standing, hesitated. His eyes darted between Ava and his fallen comrades. The sound of approaching sirens echoed faintly in the distance, red and blue lights flickering at the end of the alley. "This isn't over," he spat, backing away. "You got lucky tonight." Ava didn't lower her baton. "Next time, don't mistake my silence for weakness." The leader glared at her for a moment longer before turning and disappearing into the shadows, the others scrambling to follow. The alley fell silent, save for the sound of Ava's steady breathing and the faint hum of her wheelchair. The leader didn't get far before he turned back, his pride unwilling to let him retreat entirely. His eyes glinted with malice as he gestured for the others to regroup. Despite their battered forms and visible exhaustion, the gang obeyed, forming a semicircle around Ava. Their earlier bravado had transformed into a quiet desperation, a need to reclaim the dominance she had so effortlessly stripped from them. "You're tougher than you look," the leader admitted, his voice sharp and venomous. He wiped blood from his lip, his glare unwavering. "But no one gets the better of us. No one." The scarred man, chain still in hand, growled, "We're not letting her walk or roll out of here alive." Ava's fingers tightened on her baton as she took a calming breath, her sharp eyes darting between each of the attackers. She knew they weren't finished. Not yet. Her muscles ached from the constant movement. But she couldn't let up. These men were like cornered animals, and desperation made them unpredictable. The broad man moved first, his anger driving him forward despite the limp in his step. He had picked up the discarded trash can lid again, holding it like a shield as he charged. Ava let him come, waiting until the last possible moment before spinning her chair sharply to the side. The lid grazed her armrest as he barreled past, leaving his side exposed. Ava seized the opportunity, striking him across the ribs with the baton. He roared in pain, but before she could follow up, the lanky man closed in. "Not so fast!" the lanky man snarled, grabbing for her baton with both hands. Ava's grip was unyielding as she twisted the baton free and slammed it into his forearm. He yelped, his grip loosening, but instead of retreating, he lunged forward, wrapping his arms around her chair in a desperate attempt to hold her still. The added weight slowed her movement, and she felt the strain on the chair's motor as she tried to spin away. "Hold her!" the leader barked, rushing toward her with a knife he had retrieved from the ground. Ava's mind raced as the lanky man's grip tightened. She slammed the baton into his side repeatedly, each blow eliciting a grunt, but he held on, his desperation outweighing the pain. The scarred man approached from the opposite side, the chain swinging loosely in his hand. "You're done now," the scarred man said, his voice filled with malice. He swung the chain toward her arm, and Ava barely managed to block it with the baton. The impact reverberated through her arm, but she didn't let go. The broad man, recovering from her earlier strike, approached from behind, his massive hands reaching for the back of her chair. "Got you now, you—" Before he could finish, Ava shifted her weight forward and hit the joystick to reverse suddenly. The back of her chair collided with his stomach, knocking the wind out of him. He staggered back, gasping for air. But the other two men still had her cornered. The leader advanced, the knife in his hand gleaming under the flickering streetlight. "Let's see how smart that mouth of yours is without your fancy little stick," he growled, slashing downward. Ava's baton met the blade with a sharp clang, but the force of the blow pushed her arm back. She gritted her teeth, using her other hand to spin the chair, breaking his line of attack. She jabbed the baton into his knee, causing him to stumble, but the scarred man was already swinging his chain again. It wrapped around her baton this time, and he pulled hard, trying to disarm her. Ava's grip didn't falter. She used the chain's tension to yank him closer, slamming the reinforced front of her chair into his shin. He howled, dropping the chain as he collapsed to the ground. But the leader was relentless. He lunged again, his knife slashing in rapid arcs, forcing Ava to block each strike with her baton. The clang of metal echoed in the alley as Ava continued to parry the leader's attacks, but her arm was growing tired. The gang's persistence was testing her limits, and she knew she couldn't keep this pace forever. She needed an opening, a way to shift the tide once and for all. From the corner of her eye, she saw the young man who had called the police earlier. He stood frozen at the mouth of the alley, his phone still in hand. Ava met his wide-eyed gaze briefly, and he nodded, raising the phone to his ear once more. "Where are they? They need to hurry," the young man shouted into the phone. The faint wail of sirens grew louder in the distance, but they weren't close enough yet. The leader noticed the distraction, his fury intensifying. "You think the cops are gonna save you?" he spat, his knife slashing toward her arm. "They'll just clean up the mess when we're done." Ava blocked the strike, the baton vibrating in her hand from the impact. "Lesson 3, she said through gritted teeth. "Desperation makes you sloppy." She twisted her chair sharply, the movement throwing off his balance. As he stumbled, she delivered a powerful blow to his wrist, sending the knife flying. The leader howled in frustration, clutching his hand, but the broad man was already moving in from the side. The broad man grabbed a nearby metal pipe and swung it with all his strength, aiming for her wheels. The impact jarred her chair, forcing it to tilt dangerously. Ava fought to regain control, her fingers tightening on the joystick. She wheeled backward, narrowly avoiding another swing, and countered with a strike to his shoulder. The pipe clattered to the ground as the broad man fell to his knees. The lanky man, who had been circling behind her, lunged suddenly, grabbing the back of her chair and holding it in place. Ava twisted sharply, using the motorized power of her chair to pull free, but his grip was strong. The scarred man joined in, grabbing her arm in an attempt to pin her down. "You're not getting away this time," the lanky man shouted, his voice trembling with effort. Ava's breath came in sharp bursts as she fought against their combined strength. She drove her chair forward, slamming into the lanky man's knee and forcing him to let go. The scarred man tried to pull her baton away, but she twisted it free and struck him across the face with a brutal swing. He fell to the ground, blood pouring from his nose. The sound of approaching sirens grew deafening, the red and blue lights illuminating the alley in sharp bursts. The leader's face twisted with fury as he realized their time was running out. "Let's go," he barked, his voice filled with venom. "We'll finish this another time." The men hesitated, their gazes flicking between Ava and the flashing lights. The leader cursed under his breath before retreating into the shadows, the others scrambling to follow. Ava didn't move, her baton still raised, her breathing steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. The young man approached cautiously, his phone still in hand. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice trembling. Ava nodded, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "I'm fine," she said, her tone even. "Thanks for the assist." The police cars screeched to a halt at the entrance of the alley, officers pouring out with weapons drawn. Ava exhaled slowly, the tension finally leaving her body. The fight was over for now, but she knew it wouldn't be the last time. The flashing red and blue lights bathed the alley, their rhythmic pulses reflecting off the scattered debris. Ava remained steady in her wheelchair, the cold steel of her baton resting across her lap. Her sharp eyes tracked every movement, officers gathering evidence, marking the bloodstains on the pavement, and documenting the array of crude weapons left behind by the fleeing gang. Despite the tension dissolving, Ava's mind remained on high alert. The young man who had called for help stood awkwardly nearby, his phone dangling in his hand. He stole glances at her every few moments, clearly grappling with what he had witnessed. "You're really not hurt?" he finally asked, his voice breaking the silence between them. Ava turned her gaze to him and softened her expression. "I'm fine. A few bruises? Nothing I can't handle." His lips twitched into a nervous smile. "You were amazing. I've never seen anyone fight like that." Ava gave a small nod, acknowledging his praise but keeping her focus. "What's your name?" "Marcus," he said quickly, as if eager to prove his usefulness. "I live around here." "Well, Marcus," You've got good instincts, Ava said. If you hadn't called when you did, things might have gone differently. His face reddened slightly, but his eyes brightened at her words. I didn't know what else to do. Those guys, they're always around, you know? Not just here. I've seen them in other parts of the neighborhood, too. They mess with people. It's not the first time. Ava's fingers tightened slightly on her baton, her suspicions confirmed. Tell me everything you've seen. Marcus glanced toward the group of officers who were busy logging evidence and speaking into their radios. His voice dropped to a whisper. They're part of some crew. I don't know their name, but they've been tagging walls for months. Hate symbols, slogans. I don't understand. They show up in groups, pick fights, scare people. Ava leaned in slightly, her focus intensifying. And no one's done anything about it? Marcus hesitated, then shrugged helplessly. People are scared. Most of the time, they don't stay long enough to get caught. They jump someone, do their damage, and disappear. Cops come after. But nothing sticks. Ava nodded slowly, her mind working quickly. The attack tonight wasn't a random act of violence. It was part of a larger operation. The gang's confidence, their coordinated movements, and their purposeful targeting of people like her were all pieces of a bigger puzzle. She straightened in her chair, her decision made. Thank you, Marcus. You've been a big help. But now I need you to stay safe. These men won't take kindly to interference. Marcus frowned, but nodded. If you need anything, just ask. I'll find you, Ava promised. For now, go home. Don't linger. Marcus lingered for a moment before retreating down the street, glancing back once before disappearing around the corner. Ava turned her attention back to the police, who were now approaching her. The senior officer, his badge reading Sergeant Halstead, crouched slightly to meet Ava's gaze. Ma'am, we need to take your statement. Can you walk us through what happened here? Ava gestured toward the scattered evidence. They came out of nowhere. 4 of them. They surrounded me, taunted me, then started making threats. When they tried to grab me, I defended myself. Halstead raised an eyebrow. You defended yourself against 4 men? Ava's lips twitched into a faint smile. Years in the Special Forces teach you a thing or two. Halstead's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of respect crossing his features. I see. And do you know who they were, or why they targeted you? I've got a good idea, Ava replied. They weren't just random punks looking for trouble. They were deliberate, organized. Their tattoos alone tell me they're part of something bigger. Halstead nodded grimly. We've seen their kind before. Hate groups. These guys have been popping up more and more lately. Problem is, they're hard to pin down. No one ever talks, and by the time we gather enough evidence, they've moved on. Ava's jaw tightened. That's because no one's fighting them where it hurts. They're counting on fear to keep people quiet. Halstead studied her for a moment before sighing. Look, we'll do what we can. We've got their weapons, their blood on the ground, and your statement. It's a start. It's not enough, Ava said firmly. These men aren't just street thugs. They're part of a network. If you want to stop them, you'll need more than a few scattered arrests. Halstead's gaze hardened. And you think you can help us with that? I know I can, Ava said, her tone leaving no room for doubt. But I'll need access. Files, reports, anything you've got on them. Halstead hesitated. That's a tall order. We can't just hand over sensitive information. Then work with me, Ava countered. Because I'm not waiting around for them to come back. I'm taking the fight to them. Halstead finally relented, nodding toward one of the younger officers. Get her contact information. We'll be in touch. Ava gave them her details, then watched as they wrapped up their investigation and loaded the evidence into their vehicles. The alley grew quieter as the flashing lights receded, leaving her alone with her thoughts. She wheeled herself to the edge of the alley, her eyes scanning the dark streets beyond. The fight had been just the beginning. These men thought they could intimidate her, but they had no idea what she was capable of. Ava tightened the strap of her bag and adjusted her gloves. The battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The following morning, Ava sat in her small apartment, her laptop open on the desk in front of her. The faint hum of the city filtered through the window as she sifted through online forums, news articles, and police reports. She was looking for patterns, incidents, symbols, anything that could point to the gang's larger operations. Her phone buzzed, and she picked it up to see a message from an unknown number. "This is Sergeant Halstead. We've got some preliminary intel on the gang. Meet me at the station at 2 p.m. Ava smirked. She hadn't expected Halstead to move so quickly, but she wasn't going to waste the opportunity. She grabbed her bag and headed out, her mind already planning her next move. Halstead greeted her in the lobby, leading her to a small conference room where a stack of files waited on the table. "This is everything we've got on them so far," he said. "It's not much, but it's a start." Ava flipped through the files, her sharp eyes scanning the mugshots, reports, and notes. The gang was part of a larger group operating across several neighborhoods, their activities ranging from graffiti to violent assaults. Their targets were consistent: minorities, and anyone who didn't fit their twisted worldview. "This isn't just a gang," Ava muttered. "It's an ideology. They're recruiting." Halstead nodded. "That's what worries us. They're growing, and they're getting bolder. Last month, they attacked a local community center. No one was seriously hurt, but the message was clear." Ava's mind raced as she connected the dots. "They're escalating, testing boundaries to see how far they can go." Halstead leaned forward. "So what's your plan?" Ava met his gaze, her expression steely. "I'm going to find their leader. Cut the head off the snake." Over the next week, Ava immersed herself in the hunt. With Halstead's help, she tracked down informants, combed through surveillance footage, and followed every lead. She spoke to victims, piecing together a clearer picture of the gang's operations and their hierarchy. The leader, a man known only as Rex, was elusive but ruthless. He orchestrated the attacks, spread propaganda, and recruited new members. Ava knew taking him down wouldn't be easy, but she was determined. As she prepared for her next move, Ava reflected on the fight in the alley. It wasn't just about self-defense anymore. It was about justice. These men had terrorized her neighborhood for too long, and she wasn't going to let them win. She tightened her gloves and adjusted her chair. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. Tracking the gang proved to be far more challenging than Ava and the police initially anticipated. For every lead they uncovered, there seemed to be 2 more dead ends. The gang was careful, their movements deliberate. They operated in the shadows, using fake identities, burner phones, and coded language to cover their tracks. Ava sat in her apartment one evening, staring at the scattered evidence on her desk. Maps, photos, and notes were pinned to a corkboard, interconnected with red string. The black iron bar and the train yard were confirmed hotspots, but they didn't provide the answers she needed. Her frustration was mounting. Her phone buzzed. It was Marcus. His voice hurried. "Ava, I think I found something. Meet me at the old hardware store on Holloway Street. And come quick." The hardware store was a relic of the past, its paint peeling and windows boarded up. Ava wheeled herself into the alley behind the building, her instincts on high alert. Marcus was waiting for her, a nervous energy radiating from him. "What did you find?" Ava asked, her voice steady but curious. Marcus gestured toward the back door. "There's a guy in there, a former member of the gang. He's been laying low, but he knows things. I convinced him to talk." Ava arched an eyebrow. "And he agreed, just like that?" Marcus hesitated. "Not exactly. He, might have needed some convincing. But he's scared of Rex. Said he wants out." Ava sighed. "All right, let's hear what he has to say." Inside, the dimly lit room smelled of mildew and desperation. A man in his late 20s sat on an overturned crate, his eyes darting nervously. His hands trembled as he clutched a cup of coffee Marcus must have brought him. "Name's Caleb," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't sign up for this, you know? At first it was just a group, a bunch of guys sticking together. But Rex, he's something else." Ava crossed her arms. "What do you mean?" Caleb glanced toward the door, as if expecting Rex to burst in at any moment. "He's connected. Real connected. Everything we do, it's for someone higher up. He's got people paying him, supplying him. That's how we get the weapons, the trucks, everything. Ava leaned forward. Do you know where these supplies are coming from? Caleb hesitated, then nodded. There's a warehouse on the edge of the industrial district. They don't use it often, but when they do, it's big. I think they're planning something soon. That night, Ava and Officer Medina set up surveillance outside the warehouse Caleb mentioned. The industrial district was eerily quiet, the streets lit by flickering lamps. The warehouse loomed in the distance, its windows dark. Hours passed with no activity. Ava was beginning to wonder if Caleb had sent them on a wild goose chase when a convoy of black SUVs pulled into the lot. Men in tactical gear emerged, carrying crates into the building. Ava's sharp eyes caught the unmistakable glint of rifles through the open doors. This is it, Medina whispered, snapping photos from their hidden vantage point. But what are they doing here? Ava frowned. It's not just storage. Look at them. They're preparing for something. The two women watched as the men worked quickly, unloading crates and setting up what appeared to be a command center inside. Ava took note of their movements, but the presence of armed guards made it impossible to get closer. The following day, Ava and Halstead reviewed the surveillance footage. The gang's activities at the warehouse were clearly part of a larger operation, but their exact plans remained unclear. We need to know what's inside those crates, Halstead said, his frustration evident. But getting a warrant without hard evidence is going to be impossible. Ava's mind raced. What if we don't need a warrant? What if we intercept one of their deliveries? Halstead raised an eyebrow. You're suggesting we intercept armed criminals mid-transport? It's risky, Ava admitted. But it's our best shot at getting concrete evidence. The opportunity came 2 nights later. Ava had tracked one of the gang's delivery trucks leaving the train yard, its route taking it through a deserted stretch of road near the outskirts of town. Halstead's team set up a makeshift roadblock, their unmarked vehicles blending into the shadows. When the truck approached, the officers sprang into action, surrounding the vehicle with weapons drawn. The driver and his passenger, a pair of burly gang members, were caught off guard, but didn't resist. Inside the truck they found crates filled with assault rifles, ammunition, and explosives. This is enough to level a building, Halstead muttered, as he inspected the haul. What the hell are they planning? Ava's jaw tightened. Whatever it is, we need to stop it. Despite the success of the interception, tracking down Rex and the gang's leadership proved difficult. The captured gang members refused to talk, their loyalty to Rex unshaken even under pressure. Ava knew they needed more leverage. She decided to follow another lead. A known associate of Rex named Tyler, who worked at an auto shop on the edge of gang territory. Ava and Medina staked out the shop for days, observing Tyler's movements. One evening, Tyler left the shop in a hurry, carrying a duffel bag. Ava followed at a safe distance, her wheelchair equipped with a silent motor. Tyler led her to a secluded meeting spot near the docks, where he handed the bag to another man. Ava snapped photos of the exchange, noting the tattoos on the second man's neck. Back at the precinct, Ava and Halstead pieced together the latest information. The man at the docks was identified as Victor Orlov, a known arms dealer with ties to international criminal networks. This isn't just a local gang, Ava said, her voice grim. Rex is part of something much bigger. Halstead nodded. And if Orlov's involved, this goes way beyond hate crimes. We're looking at organized crime, possibly terrorism. With the discovery of Orlov's involvement, the task force's focus shifted. They began tracing financial transactions and shipments connected to his network, hoping to uncover the full extent of the operation. Ava continued her work on the ground, speaking to informants and tracking the gang's movements. Each piece of information brought her closer to understanding their plans. But the stakes were higher than ever. The gang wasn't just spreading hate. They were arming themselves for something catastrophic. As the pieces fell into place, Ava knew one thing for certain. This fight was far from over. Ava sat in her small apartment late into the night, her corkboard now almost completely covered with maps, photos, and notes. Red strings stretched between locations, people, and events, forming a tangled web that revealed just how deep this operation ran. The recent discovery of Viktor Orlov's involvement had shifted her focus entirely. This was no longer just about Rex's gang, it was about dismantling a much larger network of hate, crime, and terror. Her phone buzzed. It was Halstead. "We've got something," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Another shipment is moving tomorrow night. This time, they're using a truck registered to one of Orlov's shell companies. We think it's headed to a warehouse near the docks." Ava leaned forward, her mind racing. "Do we have enough for a warrant?" "Not yet," Halstead admitted. "But we're tailing it. If they lead us somewhere important, we might get what we need." "Good," Ava said. "I'll meet you at the precinct in the morning." Halstead hesitated. "Ava, I know you're invested in this, but Orlov's people aren't like Rex's gang. They're professionals. If you're spotted—" "I know the risks," Ava interrupted. "But this is bigger than all of us. I'll see you tomorrow." The next evening, Ava joined Halstead and Officer Medina in an unmarked van parked a few blocks from the train yard. Through binoculars, they watched as the gang loaded crates onto a large, nondescript truck. The operation was efficient, almost militaristic, and the men moved with the confidence of those who knew they wouldn't be stopped. "That's the same guy from the warehouse," Medina said, snapping photos of a burly man directing the loading. "Scar on his temple. He's definitely a lieutenant." "And there's Rex," Ava added, her tone sharp. The gang leader emerged from the shadows, his cold gaze sweeping the area. He spoke briefly with the man in charge before climbing into a black SUV and driving off. Halstead gritted his teeth. "He's too careful. Always keeps himself one step removed." "Not for long," Ava muttered. As the truck pulled out of the train yard, Halstead's team followed at a safe distance. Ava's modified wheelchair was secured in the back of the van, but she remained alert, her mind working through possible scenarios. The truck led them through the industrial district and toward the docks, finally pulling into a fenced-off warehouse. Halstead parked a block away, and they watched as the gang unloaded the crates, their movements shadowy and deliberate. "Medina, get the drone up," Halstead ordered. Medina launched a small surveillance drone, guiding it over the warehouse. The live feed showed rows of crates inside, as well as armed guards patrolling the perimeter. Ava's sharp eyes caught sight of several men she recognized from her earlier reconnaissance. "This isn't just a storage site," she said. "They're arming for something big." The next day, Ava pushed further into the network. Using the evidence they had gathered, she contacted an old acquaintance from her Special Forces days, Dylan, a tech expert with a knack for finding hidden connections. They met in a quiet cafe, far from prying eyes. "This is heavy stuff, Ava," Dylan said, scrolling through the data on his laptop. "You're not just dealing with local thugs. Orlov's network spans multiple countries. Weapons trafficking, money laundering, even ties to extremist groups. If you take one piece out, the rest of the puzzle adjusts." "That's the goal," Ava replied. "We need to disrupt their supply chain, cut off their funding, and expose their leadership." Dylan leaned back, his expression thoughtful. "Orlov is the key. If you can prove he's directly involved, the entire network could crumble." "And Rex?" Ava asked. Dylan smirked. "He's just a cog in the machine. Dangerous, sure, but replaceable. Orlov is the one pulling the strings." Ava spent the next week working with Dylan, Halstead, and Medina to piece together the gang's plans. Through wiretaps, intercepted messages, and undercover observations, they learned that Rex's group was planning an attack on a community center. The goal wasn't just destruction. It was to send a message, to spread fear and division. "This is their playbook," Ava said during a late-night meeting at the precinct. "Target vulnerable communities, make them feel isolated, and then expand their influence." Halstead frowned. "But why the community center? What's the strategic value?" "It's symbolic," Ava explained. "It's a place where people come together, where unity thrives. Destroying it sends a clear message. No one is safe." The team's next step was to gather concrete evidence of the planned attack. Ava suggested planting a tracker on one of the gang's vehicles, but the idea was risky. If they were caught, It would blow their cover and possibly provoke the gang into action. "I'll do it," Ava volunteered, her tone leaving no room for argument. "I know their patterns, their routines. I can get close without being seen." Halstead hesitated but ultimately nodded. "Be careful. We can't afford to lose you." That night, Ava waited in the shadows near the black iron bar. She had studied the gang's movements for weeks and knew they parked their vehicles in a lot behind the building. When the opportunity came, she rolled silently into the lot, her wheelchair's modified motor barely making a sound. The SUV was there, its black paint gleaming under the streetlights. Ava moved quickly, attaching the tracker to the undercarriage and slipping away before anyone noticed. The tracker proved invaluable. Over the next few days, it revealed the gang's movements, leading the team to additional locations, including a safe house where several members were hiding. Through surveillance and intercepted communications, they uncovered the final pieces of the plan. The attack on the community center was scheduled for the following week. The gang planned to use explosives hidden in a delivery truck, ensuring maximum damage. "We need to move now," Ava said, her voice urgent. "If we wait, people will die." Halstead nodded. "Agreed, but we need to be smart about this. One mistake, and they'll scatter." The task force began coordinating with other agencies, pooling resources for a simultaneous operation. The plan was ambitious: raid the warehouse, intercept the delivery truck, and arrest Rex and his inner circle, all within a matter of hours. Ava was at the center of the preparations, her military experience proving invaluable. She helped map out the logistics, identify potential risks, and ensure every officer knew their role. As the day of the operation approached, Ava felt a mix of anticipation and apprehension. This was it, the culmination of weeks of work. Failure wasn't an option. The moment the raid began, chaos erupted inside the warehouse. Flashbangs burst near the entrances, their blinding light and deafening noise sending gang members scattering in every direction. Officers flooded in, shouting commands as they secured crates filled with weapons and explosives. Ava, positioned near the rear of the building, moved with purpose, her eyes scanning the frenzied scene for Rex. In the chaos, Rex was calm. He barked orders at his men, directing them to defend key positions while he slipped through a side door. Ava caught a glimpse of him disappearing into the shadows and immediately gave chase, her wheelchair's motor humming softly as she maneuvered around crates and debris. "Rex is on the move!" she shouted into her comms. "I'm in pursuit." Halstead and Medina moved to intercept, but Rex was fast and knew the layout better than anyone. He weaved through the narrow corridors of the warehouse, knocking over obstacles to slow his pursuers. Ava wasn't deterred. Her wheelchair's reinforced wheels handled the uneven terrain with ease, and her sharp instincts guided her as she tracked Rex's movements. He bolted out the side exit, sprinting toward a waiting black SUV. "Stop him!" Halstead yelled, as he and Medina emerged behind her. But Rex reached the vehicle first. The SUV roared to life, its tires screeching as it peeled away. Ava pushed herself harder, her wheelchair moving at top speed as she raced after it. The vehicle swerved onto the main road, disappearing into the night. Ava didn't waste a second. She relayed the vehicle's description and license plate to Dylan, who immediately began tracking it through traffic cameras. "I've got eyes on the SUV," Dylan said over the comms. "They're heading east toward the industrial district." Ava clenched her fists. "Keep me updated. We're not letting him get away." Halstead called in additional units, their sirens wailing as they joined the pursuit. Ava and her team followed in an unmarked vehicle, their headlights cutting through the darkness as they sped toward the industrial district. The industrial district was a labyrinth of warehouses, shipping yards, and narrow alleyways. Rex's driver weaved through the maze with precision, using the tight corners and cluttered streets to evade the pursuing officers. Ava's vehicle stayed close, but the SUV was faster and more maneuverable. Dylan's voice crackled over the comms. "They're heading toward the old steel mill. It's a dead end, if we can box them in." Halstead nodded, his knuckles white as he gripped the steering wheel. "We'll force them into a corner." As they approached the mill, Rex's driver made a sharp turn onto a dirt road, the SUV's tires kicking up a cloud of dust. Ava's team followed, the vehicle bouncing over the uneven terrain. "They're trying to lose us in the woods," Medina said, her voice tense. "We need to cut them off." Ava's mind raced. "Take the next left. There's a service road that loops around." Halstead didn't hesitate. Veering onto the narrow path, the team's vehicle barreled through the trees, the headlights illuminating the dense undergrowth. The service road led them to a clearing near the steel mill's perimeter. Ava spotted the SUV ahead, its taillights glowing like red beacons in the dark. "They've stopped," Dylan reported. "Something's not right." As they drew closer, Ava realized why. The SUV had come to a halt near a large construction site, where heavy machinery and stacks of steel beams were scattered. Rex and his men were already out of the vehicle, using the equipment as cover. "Ambush!" Ava shouted as gunfire erupted. Bullets ricocheted off the ground and nearby vehicles, forcing Ava and her team to take cover. Halstead radioed for backup as Medina returned fire, her shots precise and controlled. "We've got them pinned down," Halstead said, his voice strained. "But they're not going quietly." Ava scanned the scene, her sharp eyes tracking Rex as he moved between the steel beams. He was heading toward the mill, using the chaos as a distraction. "I'm going after him," Ava said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Ava maneuvered her wheelchair through the construction site, dodging debris and ducking behind cover as gunfire continued. Her focus was unshakable, her training kicking in as she tracked Rex's movements. The steel mill loomed ahead, its towering smokestacks casting long shadows over the yard. Rex slipped inside, his silhouette disappearing into the darkness. Ava followed, her baton gripped tightly in one hand. The air inside the mill was thick with the scent of rust and oil, the faint hum of machinery echoing through the cavernous space. "Rex!" she called out, her voice cutting through the silence. "You can't run forever." His laugh echoed from somewhere above. "You're persistent, I'll give you that. But this ends here." Ava wheeled forward cautiously, her eyes scanning every shadow and corner. She spotted movement on an overhead catwalk and shifted her focus upward. Rex stood there, his gun trained on her. "You're out of your depth," he sneered. "This isn't some street brawl, and you're not a hero." Ava smirked. "You're right. I'm worse." She reached for a control panel nearby and activated the mill's conveyor system. The sudden noise and movement startled Rex, giving Ava the opening she needed. She maneuvered quickly, taking cover behind a large piece of machinery as he fired. Rex climbed down from the catwalk, his gun still in hand. Ava waited, her breathing steady, her mind calculating her next move. "You've caused me a lot of trouble," Rex said as he stepped into view. "But it's over now. You're alone, and no one's coming to save you." Ava met his gaze, unflinching. "I don't need saving." Before Rex could react, Ava launched herself forward, using her wheelchair's reinforced frame to ram into him. The impact knocked the gun from his hand, and the two grappled in the confined space. Rex was strong, but Ava's training gave her the edge. She twisted his arm, forcing him to the ground, but he lashed out with a brutal kick that sent her chair skidding backward. Rex scrambled to his feet, grabbing a nearby steel pipe as a makeshift weapon. He swung it at Ava, but she blocked it with her baton, the clash of metal ringing through the mill. Their fight continued, each blow calculated and fierce. Ava struck him across the ribs, but he retaliated with a sharp jab that knocked the baton from her hand. Realizing he was losing, Rex made a desperate move. He bolted toward an emergency exit, his breathing ragged as he pushed through the heavy door and disappeared into the night. Ava hesitated for only a moment before giving chase, her wheelchair's motor humming as she navigated the narrow corridors. Outside, the mill's yard was a sprawling maze of equipment and storage containers. Ava moved quickly, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of Rex. "He's heading for the docks," Dylan's voice came through her earpiece. "If he gets to a boat, we'll lose him." Ava gritted her teeth, pushing herself harder. The docks were just ahead, the sound of lapping water growing louder as she closed the distance. Rex was already there, climbing into a small motorboat. He started the engine, the boat lurching forward as he steered toward open water. Ava didn't hesitate. She spotted a nearby patrol boat and signaled to the officers on board. "We need to move! Now!" The officers helped her onto the boat, and they sped after Rex, the powerful engine cutting through the waves. Ava gripped the edge of the vessel, her eyes locked on Rex's boat as it weaved through the dark water. "He's heading for the marina," Dylan said. "It's a dead end, but he might have backup waiting." Ava's jaw tightened. "Then we cut him off before he gets there." The chase continued, the boats racing through the water as the city lights glimmered in the distance. Ava knew this was her last chance to bring Rex in, and she wasn't going to let him slip away again. The patrol boat sliced through the water, its engine roaring as Ava and the officers closed the distance between them and Rex's motorboat. The salty spray stung her face, but she didn't flinch. Her eyes remained locked on Rex, who was maneuvering toward the shadowy outlines of the marina. As the marina came into view, Ava's instincts sharpened. The rows of abandoned docks, lined with rotting wood and decrepit vessels, offered Rex plenty of hiding spots. The faint glow of city lights illuminated the marina just enough to see Rex's boat skidding to a stop near an old pier. He jumped onto the dock, his figure disappearing into the maze of boats and crates. "Cut the engine!" Ava barked at the officer piloting the patrol boat. "We'll follow on foot." The officers secured the boat, and Ava maneuvered onto the dock, her reinforced wheelchair humming quietly as she rolled forward. Halstead and Medina flanked her, their weapons drawn and eyes scanning for movement. "He's here somewhere," Halstead muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. Ava nodded. "He won't go far. This place is a dead end. He's either waiting for backup or trying to find a way out." The team moved cautiously through the marina, the creaking of wooden planks beneath their feet blending with the gentle lapping of water against the boats. Ava's sharp eyes scanned every shadow, her baton gripped tightly in her hand. Rex was cornered, and she knew desperation would make him dangerous. A sudden noise, a splash, caught Ava's attention. She turned sharply, her wheelchair's motor whining softly as she adjusted her position. The sound came from a narrow alley between two rows of docked boats. "Cover me," she whispered to Halstead, who nodded and took position behind a nearby crate. Ava rolled forward, her baton raised. The alley was dark, the faint smell of diesel and seawater hanging in the air. She spotted movement ahead, a faint glint of light off metal. "Rex!" she called out, her voice calm but firm. "There's nowhere left to run. Come out now, and we'll make this easier for everyone." A low chuckle echoed from the shadows. "Easier for you, maybe, but not for me." Before Ava could react, Rex lunged from the darkness, wielding a length of rusted pipe. He swung it toward her head, but Ava ducked, the pipe narrowly missing as it smashed into the side of a boat. The impact reverberated through the marina, sending a flock of gulls screeching into the night sky. Rex pressed the attack, his swings wild but powerful. Ava dodged each strike, her movement swift and calculated. She waited for an opening, then struck back, her baton connecting with his ribs. Rex grunted in pain, but didn't slow down. "You're tough, I'll give you that," he snarled, circling her. "But you're out of your league." Ava smirked. "Funny. I was about to say the same thing." She feinted left, then spun her chair to the right, catching Rex off guard. Her baton struck his wrist, sending the pipe clattering to the ground. Rex stumbled back, clutching his arm, but he quickly recovered, his eyes blazing with fury. "You think you've won?" he spat. "You have no idea what's coming." Before Ava could respond, a sharp whistle pierced the air. From the shadows, two more figures emerged. Rex's backup. Both men were armed, one with a crowbar and the other with a knife. They flanked Ava, their predatory grins gleaming in the dim light. "Looks like the odds just shifted," Rex sneered, stepping back to let his men advance. Ava tightened her grip on the baton, her mind racing. Halstead and Medina were nearby, but the confined space made it impossible for them to take a clear shot without hitting her. "3 against 1?" Ava said, her tone mocking. "You must be getting desperate." The man with the crowbar lunged first, swinging downward with brute force. Ava blocked the strike with her baton, the impact sending a jolt through her arm. She twisted her chair sharply, slamming into his shin and knocking him off balance. He fell with a yelp, his weapon clattering to the ground. The second man moved in, his knife glinting as he slashed toward her. Ava ducked, the blade grazing her shoulder but failing to penetrate her reinforced jacket. She countered with a swift strike to his wrist, forcing him to drop the knife. Halstead and Medina chose that moment to act. Halstead fired a warning shot into the air, the sound echoing through the marina. "Drop your weapons and step away!" The two men hesitated, their confidence wavering. Rex, however, remained defiant. He grabbed the crowbar from the ground and swung it wildly, forcing Halstead and Medina to take cover. Amid the chaos, Rex spotted an opportunity. He bolted toward one of the smaller boats moored nearby, its engine already running. Ava saw him leap onto the vessel and cursed under her breath. "He's getting away!" she shouted, wheeling forward. Halstead fired at the boat's engine, but the shot missed, ricocheting off the metal hull. The boat lurched forward, its motor roaring as Rex steered it toward open water. Ava turned to Dylan, her voice urgent. "Track him! We need his location." "I'm on it," Dylan replied, his fingers flying across his keyboard. He can't outrun the satellite feeds. Back at the precinct, the mood was grim. Despite their efforts, Rex had slipped through their fingers again. Ava sat at her desk, her baton resting across her lap as she replayed the events in her mind. "This isn't working," she muttered, frustration evident in her tone. "He's always one step ahead." Halstead leaned against the desk, his expression tired but determined. "We're closing the net. Every time he runs, he leaves a trail. Sooner or later, he'll make a mistake." Medina joined them, holding a tablet. "Dylan's tracking his movements. The boat he took is heading toward the docks on the east side of the city. We think he's regrouping with Orlov's men." Ava nodded, her mind already formulating a plan. "We need to hit him where it hurts. Take out his resources, cut off his escape routes, force him into a corner where he has no choice but to surrender." Halstead hesitated. "That's a tall order. He's got connections, safe houses, then we find them." Ava interrupted. "We dismantle his network piece by piece until there's nowhere left for him to hide." The team spent the next week meticulously tracking Rex's movements and gathering intelligence. Dylan uncovered a series of encrypted communications between Rex and Orlov, detailing shipments of weapons and supplies. The messages also hinted at a larger plan, something involving a high-profile target. "We need to act fast," Ava said during a late-night briefing. "If we don't stop them now, more lives will be at risk." Halstead agreed. "Let's focus on their logistics. If we can intercept their shipments, we'll cripple their operation." As Ava and the team pursued lead after lead, Rex remained elusive. Each raid brought them closer, but he always managed to slip away at the last moment. His taunts echoed in Ava's mind, fueling her determination. She knew the fight wasn't just about capturing Rex. It was about dismantling the ideology he represented. Every step forward was a victory, no matter how small. But the clock was ticking, and Ava knew the final showdown was drawing near. The air was heavy with frustration as the team regrouped at the precinct after Rex's escape at the marina. Ava rolled into the operations room, her face set in a grim mask. The tension was palpable. Halstead paced the room while Medina and Dylan pored over surveillance feeds and intercepted communications. "He's slipping through our fingers again and again," Halstead muttered. "We've been 2 steps behind every time." "That's because we're reacting to his moves," Ava said firmly. "We need to get ahead of him, disrupt his plans before he makes them." Medina tapped her tablet, displaying a map of the city with marked locations where Rex and his gang had been sighted. "We've got leads from the marina," she said. "The boat he used is registered to a shell company tied to Orlov. We think it's docked at a private slip on the east side of the city." Dylan chimed in. "I've been monitoring encrypted chatter. Rex is meeting with Orlov's people tonight. They're planning something big, but I haven't cracked the details yet." Ava nodded, her mind already forming a plan. If Rex is meeting Orlov's people, That's our chance to catch him and dismantle this network. But we'll need to play this smart. The team decided on a bold strategy. A sting operation to catch Rex in the act. Dylan hacked into the city's traffic and marina cameras, tracking Rex's movements in real time. Meanwhile, Ava coordinated with Halstead and Medina to deploy undercover officers at the docks. By nightfall, the team was in position. Ava, wearing a concealed earpiece, waited in a discreet surveillance van parked near the docks. Her wheelchair was equipped with enhanced mobility features, ready for action. "Target sighted," Dylan's voice came through the comms. "Rex just arrived. He's heading to Dock 14, Halstead responded. "All units, stay sharp. No one moves until Ava gives the signal." Through the surveillance feed, Ava saw Rex step out of a black SUV, flanked by two heavily armed men. His face was calm, but his eyes darted around, scanning for potential threats. He approached a small group of men unloading crates from a cargo ship. "That's Orlov's crew," Medina whispered. "This is it." Ava watched intently as Rex began speaking to the men, gesturing toward the crates. She noticed one of the men handing Rex a tablet, which he examined briefly before nodding. This was the proof they needed. Rex and Orlov's crew were working together. "Now," Ava said into the comms. Halstead and Medina led a team of officers, moving in quickly but silently to surround the group. The air was electric with tension as the officers stepped into the light, weapons drawn. "Police! Hands in the air!" Halstead shouted. Panic erupted. Orlov's men reached for their weapons, but the officers were faster, disarming them with precise, non-lethal strikes. Rex, however, didn't panic. He shoved the tablet into a crate and bolted toward the maze of shipping containers. "Rex is running!" Ava shouted, already wheeling herself out of the van. The docks were a labyrinth of towering crates, narrow walkways, and dimly lit paths. Ava maneuvered her wheelchair with practiced precision, following Rex's trail. She could hear the sound of his footsteps echoing off the metal surfaces. "You can't run forever, Rex," she called out. He didn't respond, disappearing around a corner. Ava pushed herself harder, her chair's motor humming as she navigated the uneven terrain. Ahead, she caught a glimpse of him climbing onto a stack of crates. "I've got him in sight," she reported through her earpiece. "He's trying to get to higher ground." Halstead and Medina split up to cut off Rex's escape routes, but he was relentless, leaping from crate to crate with the agility of a predator. Ava knew she couldn't match him physically, but she didn't need to. Her mind worked faster. She spotted a crane operator's control panel nearby and wheeled toward it. "Dylan, I need access to the crane controls." "On it," Dylan replied. "Give me 30 seconds." As Rex climbed higher, Ava activated the crane, moving a container to block his path. He stumbled, barely catching himself on the edge of a crate. "Give it up, Rex!" Ava shouted. "You're out of options." Rex glared down at her, his face twisted with rage. "You think this ends here? You have no idea what's coming." With the crane cutting off his escape, Rex climbed down, landing in a narrow alley between two stacks of containers. Ava moved to block the exit, her baton at the ready. "It's over, Rex," she said, her voice steady. "Surrender now, and maybe you'll live long enough to see a courtroom." Rex sneered. "You think you've won? I'm just a piece of the puzzle. Take me out, and someone worse will take my place." Ava didn't flinch. "Then I'll take them down too, one by one." Rex lunged toward her, but Ava was ready. She swung her baton, catching him across the arm. He grunted in pain but kept coming, throwing a wild punch that glanced off her shoulder. Ava countered with a swift strike to his knee, forcing him to the ground. Before he could recover, Halstead and Medina arrived, pinning him down and cuffing his hands behind his back. "It's over," Halstead said, his voice firm. The tension in the precinct's operations room was thick as Ava, Halstead, and Medina sifted through the trove of evidence recovered from Rex's tablet and the intercepted crates. The air was heavy with the weight of what they had uncovered. The walls were lined with boards covered in photographs, maps, and documents, connected by a web of strings that painted a grim picture of Rex's network and its far-reaching influence. Dylan sat at his laptop, his fingers flying across the keyboard, as he decrypted the last remaining files on Rex's tablet. "Got it," he exclaimed, his voice cutting through the silence. He turned the screen toward the group. Blueprints, detailed plans, and even schedules. This isn't just a gang. It's an organized syndicate. They were planning coordinated attacks on multiple targets. Ava leaned forward, her sharp eyes scanning the documents. Each line confirmed her worst fears. The network's targets were chosen not just for their symbolic value, but for maximum psychological impact. Community centers, schools, synagogues, and cultural hubs, all places where unity and diversity thrived, were marked for destruction. "These aren't random acts of violence," Ava said, her voice cold. "This is terrorism." Medina pointed to one document. "Look at this financial trail. Wire transfers from offshore accounts, all routed through shell companies tied to Orlov. This proves he's bankrolling the entire operation." Halstead folded his arms, his jaw tight. "This isn't just about Rex anymore. Orlov is the mastermind. We need to take this evidence to federal authorities." Ava shook her head. "Not yet. If we move too soon, Orlov will slip away like smoke. We need to dismantle the network from the ground up. Take out every piece until he has nowhere to hide." The air was electric with tension as Orlov's name was spoken in the precinct. He wasn't just another criminal in a long line of targets. He was the mastermind. His capture meant dismantling the entire network of terror and violence that had spread across the region. Every piece of evidence pointed back to him. The funding, the logistics, the propaganda. Rex had been a loyal pawn, but Orlov was the architect. Ava sat at the center of the operations room, the glow of multiple screens illuminating her sharp features. On the monitors, Dylan had pulled up satellite imagery and traffic feeds, zeroing in on Orlov's last known location, a private compound on the edge of the city, fortified and isolated. "This is it," Dylan said, his voice steady. "Orlov knows Rex has been taken. He's not going to wait around. Intel suggests he's preparing to leave the country tonight. A private helicopter is set to take off in less than 2 hours." Halstead leaned over the table, his jaw tight. "What kind of defenses are we looking at?" "Armed guards," Dylan replied. "Sophisticated security systems, motion sensors, cameras, probably even automated defenses. Orlov didn't make it this far by being careless." Medina folded her arms. "This isn't just a raid. It's a siege." Ava nodded, her mind already racing. "If Orlov gets airborne, we lose him. We need to neutralize his escape before he gets the chance." Halstead straightened. "What's the plan?" The team moved swiftly, deploying in unmarked vehicles under the cover of night. Ava rode in the surveillance van with Dylan, her wheelchair braced for action. Halstead and Medina led the tactical units, coordinating with local SWAT for additional support. The compound loomed ahead, a fortress of steel and concrete surrounded by tall fences and floodlights. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their weapons glinting under the harsh lights. 2 minutes to go time, Dylan said, his fingers flying across his keyboard. "I'm disabling their external cameras now. You'll have a narrow window to breach the perimeter." Ava adjusted her gloves, her expression steely. "We'll make it count." The assault began with precision. Halstead's team cut through the fence, their movements silent and deliberate. A pair of guards near the main gate were subdued with tranquilizers, their bodies dragged into the shadows. Inside the compound, chaos erupted. Flashbangs detonated, their blinding light and deafening noise disorienting the guards. Ava and Medina moved with purpose, weaving through the confusion as Halstead directed the assault. "Orlov's in the main building," Dylan said through the comms. "He's heading for the helipad. You need to move now." Ava maneuvered her wheelchair through the courtyard, her baton ready. She spotted 2 guards emerging from the shadows and didn't hesitate. The first swung his rifle toward her, but she deflected the barrel with her baton, striking him across the face. The second lunged, but she spun her chair, slamming into his knee and knocking him to the ground. "Clear," she said into her comms, her breathing steady. Inside the main building, the atmosphere was tense. The corridors were lined with expensive art and guarded by Orlov's most loyal men. Medina and Halstead led the charge, their weapons precise as they neutralized the opposition. Ava moved swiftly through the halls, her sharp eyes scanning for any sign of Orlov. She knew he was close. His desperation would make him reckless. "Helipad is on the roof," Dylan said. "He's almost there." "Not for long," Ava replied, determination hardening her voice. The stairwell to the roof was narrow and steep, but Ava didn't hesitate. She activated the climbing mechanism on her wheelchair, the motor humming as she ascended. Halstead and Medina flanked her, their weapons ready. When they burst onto the roof, the helicopter's rotors were already spinning, the deafening roar making it hard to hear. Orlov stood near the open door, flanked by 2 armed guards. His expression was cold, calculating. "You're too late!" Orlov shouted over the noise. "This ends here!" Ava wheeled forward, her baton raised. "You're right. It does. But not the way you think." Orlov nodded to his guards, who raised their weapons. Medina and Halstead fired, their shots precise, taking out 1 guard immediately. The second ducked behind a crate, returning fire. Ava used the distraction to maneuver closer, her eyes locked on Orlov. The mastermind climbed into the helicopter, shouting at the pilot to take off. The aircraft began to lift, but Ava wasn't about to let him escape. She reached for a grappling hook in her bag, expertly aiming and firing it toward the helicopter's skid. The hook latched on, the rope tightening as Ava's wheelchair was pulled toward the edge of the roof. She braced herself, her muscles straining as she held firm. "Halstead, take the pilot!" she shouted. Halstead fired, the bullet shattering the cockpit glass. The pilot slumped forward, and the helicopter lurched, its rotors slowing. Orlov cursed, grabbing a pistol from his coat and aiming at Ava. She didn't flinch. With a burst of strength, she yanked on the rope, causing the helicopter to tilt. Orlov lost his footing, stumbling toward the open door. Ava released the rope and wheeled forward, striking him across the chest with her baton. Orlov fell to the roof, his gun skidding out of reach. Ava was on him in an instant, pinning him with her baton pressed against his throat. "It's over," she said, her voice cold and unyielding. "No more running. No more hiding." Orlov sneered, but there was fear in his eyes. "Do you think this changes anything? There will always be others." "Then I'll take them down too," Ava replied, her gaze unwavering. With Orlov in custody, the team returned to the precinct. Their victory hard-earned. The compound was secure, the network dismantled, and the mastermind behind it all finally brought to justice. As Orlov was led away in handcuffs, Ava watched, her resolve unshaken. This was more than just a victory. It was a message to those who thrived on hate and fear. Their time was over. Justice had prevailed, and Ava knew the fight for a better world would continue. But tonight, they won. Over the next several days, the team worked tirelessly to organize the evidence into a cohesive narrative. Dylan's skills were invaluable, tracing the financial web back to Orlov's legitimate businesses and exposing how he funneled resources into Rex's operations. Witness testimonies from the gang's former associates added a human layer to the investigation. Caleb, the young man who had initially tipped Ava off, became a key witness. Sitting in an interrogation room, his hands trembled as he recounted his time with the gang. "I didn't know what I was getting into," Caleb said, his voice shaking. "It started with graffiti, then protests, then the violence. Rex made it sound like we were part of something bigger, something important, but it was all lies." Ava nodded, her expression firm but understanding. "You're doing the right thing now. Your testimony can help put them away for good." Another witness, a local shop owner whose business had been extorted by the gang, provided critical insight into their methods. "They came in like they owned the place," he said, his voice bitter. "Demanded protection money, threatened my family. I reported it once, but nothing happened. They made sure we were all too scared to speak up." With every piece of evidence, the team built a stronger case. Surveillance footage showed Rex personally overseeing weapons deals and meeting with Orlov's men. Forensic analysis tied the explosives recovered from the warehouse to attacks in neighboring cities. Each discovery added another nail to Rex's coffin. As the evidence mounted, The case drew national attention. News outlets covered the story relentlessly, framing it as a pivotal moment in the fight against domestic terrorism. The pressure was immense, but Ava thrived under it. She worked closely with the district attorney, crafting a case that would ensure Rex and his accomplices faced the full extent of the law. The courtroom became the next battlefield. Prosecutors prepared to argue not just for justice, but for accountability. They wanted the world to see the full extent of the gang's crimes and the ideology that fueled them. Meanwhile, Rex's gang and Orlov's defense team worked to discredit the evidence, arguing that he was a scapegoat for larger systemic issues. Ava knew they would play dirty, exploiting every loophole and technicality to sow doubt in the jury's mind. "I'll testify," Ava told the district attorney during a late-night strategy meeting. "I was there. I saw everything. Let them try to discredit me." The DA nodded. "Your testimony will be crucial, but be prepared. They'll come after you hard." Ava's expression didn't waver. Let them. The trial of Victor Orlov and Rex was not just a legal proceeding. It was a historical event, a reckoning that the nation had been waiting for. The world watched as two men, once feared for their capacity to manipulate, divide, and destroy, were brought to justice. Victor Orlov, the mastermind, the financier, the man who pulled the strings, and Rex, the enforcer, the loyal soldier who turned Orlov's twisted ideology into violence. Together, they had built an empire of terror, and together, they would face the consequences. The courthouse, an imposing building of marble and steel, became a battleground for ideologies. On one side were the victims, survivors, and their supporters, armed with signs demanding justice. On the other were Orlov's few remaining loyalists, defiantly proclaiming his innocence and spewing conspiracy theories. Between them were rows of law enforcement, there to ensure that the trial itself was not overshadowed by the chaos outside. Inside the courthouse, the tension was suffocating. The air buzzed with anticipation as journalists, activists, and spectators filled every available seat. Ava sat silently in the gallery, her wheelchair positioned near the front, where she could see every movement and hear every word. Her presence was a reminder that this was not just a legal fight, it was personal. The lead prosecutor, Samantha Willis, was a formidable figure. She had a reputation for dismantling even the most complex defenses, and today her focus was sharper than ever. As she stood to deliver her opening statement, the room fell silent. "These defendants," she began, her voice steady and deliberate, "are not just criminals. They are architects of terror. Victor Orlov, the mastermind who financed and orchestrated a campaign of hate, division, and destruction. And Rex, his enforcer, who turned Orlov's ideology into violence. Together, they created a network designed to dismantle communities, incite fear, and destroy lives. Today, we will show you the extent of their crimes and why they must be held accountable." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "This trial is not just about justice for the victims. It is about ensuring that no one else suffers the way they did. It is about sending a message. Hate and terror have no place in our society." On the other side of the courtroom, the defense attorney, Ethan Greer, adjusted his tie and stood to address the jury. His tone was calm, his words carefully chosen. "My clients are not the monsters they are being painted as," he said. "Victor Orlov is a businessman, not a terrorist. Rex is a man who has been mischaracterized and scapegoated for broader societal issues. This trial is about power, about silencing dissent and controlling the narrative. We will show you that the evidence is circumstantial and the accusations are exaggerated." Greer's words were meant to sow doubt, but Ava could see through the facade. Orlov sat beside him, his expression calm and calculating, while Rex bristled with barely concealed anger. The prosecution's case was a masterclass in precision. Samantha Willis and her team presented a mountain of evidence, meticulously connecting the dots between Orlov's financial empire and the violent acts carried out by Rex and his followers. Exhibits and evidence. Large screens displayed intercepted communications, financial records, and video footage. Orlov's emails revealed his direct involvement in selecting targets, community centers, places of worship, and cultural landmarks. Each location was chosen for its symbolic value, designed to maximize fear and division. The footage showed Rex leading his crew in acts of vandalism, arson, and assault. His voice boomed in the recordings, spewing hate-filled rhetoric and rallying his followers to defend their warped ideology. Every dollar, every order, every attack traces back to these men, Willis said, her voice steady. This was not random violence. It was calculated, financed, and executed with precision. The prosecution called survivors to the stand, each one a testament to resilience in the face of terror. A woman in her early 20s, her arm in a sling from an attack on her community center, spoke tearfully about the fear that now gripped her neighborhood. "They came to destroy what we built," she said, "to make us feel like we didn't belong, but we're still here. We rebuilt stronger, and now we're here to ensure they face justice." The jury listened intently, their expressions grim as each story painted a vivid picture of the defendants' actions and their consequences. Caleb, the former gang member turned whistleblower, was a pivotal witness. He shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding Rex's seething glare. "I was one of them," Caleb admitted. "I believed the lies they fed me. Orlov made us feel like we were part of something bigger, like we had a purpose. But all he gave us was fear and destruction. I'm here to make it right." His testimony connected the dots, showing how Orlov's ideology trickled down to his followers. He didn't just give orders. He manipulated us, turned us into weapons. Rex slammed his fist on the table, his voice booming. "You spineless traitor! You don't know what loyalty is!" The judge banged her gavel. "Mr. Rex, control yourself, or I will have you removed." When Ava took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. Her voice was calm, her words unflinching as she recounted her encounters with both men. "Rex thought he could intimidate me," she began. "He surrounded me, taunted me, and attacked me because he thought I was weak. But he underestimated the strength of those he sought to oppress." She turned her gaze to Orlov. "And Orlov? He's the reason Rex existed. He funded the weapons, orchestrated the attacks, and spread the ideology that fueled this network. Without him, none of it would have been possible." Her testimony painted a vivid picture of her pursuit of justice, from the alley ambush to the compound raid and the rooftop showdown. She described Orlov's attempt to flee and Rex's violent resistance, each detail landing like a hammer blow. The defense called Orlov to the stand first. He was calm, composed, his voice a chilling mix of charisma and denial. "I am a businessman," he said, his voice smooth. "I have no control over how my resources are used. These accusations are baseless, designed to destroy my reputation." Prosecutor Willis was relentless during cross-examination. She presented emails, wire transfers, and intercepted communications that tied Orlov directly to Rex's operation. "In this email," Willis said, holding up a document, "you instructed Rex to target community centers and places of worship. You called them symbolic targets. How do you explain that?" Orlov hesitated, but his mask didn't crack. "It was a suggestion, nothing more. I never intended for anyone to be harmed." Rex's testimony was a stark contrast. He radiated anger, his voice a mixture of defiance and disdain. "I did what I had to do," he snarled. "These so-called victims are weak. Orlov gave me the tools, but I made the decisions. No one forced me." His admission sent a ripple through the courtroom. Greer's face darkened as he realized his client had just implicated himself and Orlov. After weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. The tension in the room was palpable as the foreman read aloud the charges. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit domestic terrorism, guilty. On the charge of weapons trafficking, guilty. on the charge of incitement to violence. Guilty. Each verdict was another nail in Orlov and Rex's coffin. Orlov's calm demeanor finally cracked, his fists clenching as the reality of his fate set in. Rex, meanwhile, erupted in anger. "You think this changes anything?" he shouted. "There will always be people like me." The judge banged her gavel. "Order in the court, Mr. Rex. You will remain silent." She turned her gaze to the two men, her voice cold and resolute. "Viktor Orlov, Rex, you orchestrated a campaign of terror that caused unimaginable harm. You thrived on fear, hatred, and violence. These crimes represent a betrayal of our most fundamental values. Hate has no place in our society. This court sentences the defendants to life in federal prison, without the possibility of parole." Each word felt like a victory, a step closer to justice. By the time the foreman finished, Rex and his co-defendants faced multiple life sentences. Ava exhaled, the weight of the battle lifting from her shoulders. The fight wasn't over. There were still others like Rex and Orlov out there, but this was a decisive victory, a crack in the armor of a network that had long thrived in the shadows. The courtroom had been a battlefield, but the true war continued outside its walls. As news of the verdict spread, it ignited conversations across the nation. Communities scarred by similar violence found renewed hope. Survivors saw the possibility of justice, and grassroots organizations redoubled their efforts to confront hate head-on. The community center, once a hub of life and unity, had been left in ruins by Rex's gang. But its reconstruction became a rallying cry. Volunteers from all walks of life gathered, wielding tools and paintbrushes, determined to restore not just a building, but a symbol of resilience. At the heart of this movement was Ava. She worked tirelessly, not just overseeing the efforts, but joining them. From organizing fundraisers to speaking at events, she became a visible and vocal leader. Her wheelchair, once a target of ridicule by Rex and his men, now symbolized unwavering strength. Ava attended the first vigil, held at the partially rebuilt center. Hundreds gathered, their faces lit by the warm glow of candlelight. Survivors shared their stories, their voices steady, but filled with emotion. One woman, holding her young daughter, said, "They tried to break us, but we are unbreakable." When it was Ava's turn to speak, she wheeled to the makeshift podium. The crowd fell silent, their attention riveted on her. "This building is more than brick and mortar," Ava began, her voice strong. "It's a testament to what we can achieve when we stand together. Rex and Orlov wanted to divide us, to make us afraid. But look around. Fear didn't win. Hate didn't win. Unity did." The applause was thunderous, a wave of affirmation that rolled through the crowd. Among them was Marcus, the young man who had first alerted Ava to the gang's activities. He approached her after the vigil, his face alight with admiration. "You did it," he said simply. "You brought them to justice." Ava smiled and shook her head. "We did it," she corrected, gesturing to the crowd. "Every person here played a part, and it's not over. The fight continues." Marcus nodded, his expression serious. "But it's a start." The trial's outcome sent shockwaves across the nation. Politicians, activists, and leaders seized the moment to push for systemic change. News outlets covered the verdict extensively, framing it as a turning point in the fight against domestic terrorism. In Congress, new legislation was introduced aimed at combating hate crimes more effectively. The Community Resilience Act proposed increased funding for education programs, hate crime investigations, and victim support services. It also called for stricter penalties for those who incited violence. Ava was invited to testify before a congressional committee on the importance of these measures. She sat at the long table, facing rows of lawmakers and cameras, her presence commanding. "We cannot wait for tragedy to strike before we act," Ava said. The signs were there: graffiti, threats, small acts of violence that escalated into terrorism. If we address hate at its roots, we can prevent it from growing into something catastrophic. Her testimony was met with bipartisan applause, and the bill gained momentum. Ava's role in the fight against hate grew beyond her city as she became a national advocate, traveling to communities affected by similar violence and sharing her story. Despite the victory, Ava knew the battle was far from over. Orlov's network was vast, and dismantling it required relentless effort. Law enforcement continued to raid safe houses and intercept shipments, but remnants of the organization adapted, scattering and operating more covertly. One evening, Ava received a call from Halstead. His tone was grim. "We've picked up chatter about a splinter group. They're planning something." Ava's heart sank. "What do we know?" "Not much yet," Halstead admitted, "but they're angry. They see Orlov and Rex as martyrs. We're tracking leads, but we could use your insight." Ava spent sleepless nights poring over intelligence, identifying patterns and potential targets. The threat of retaliation loomed large, but she refused to let fear dictate her actions. Instead, she worked to empower others, training community leaders in recognizing and countering hate. In the midst of her activism, Ava didn't forget the individuals whose lives had been upended by Rex and Orlov. She visited survivors regularly, offering support and listening to their stories. One day, she met with an elderly man whose church had been targeted. He showed her a photo of the congregation gathered before the attack, their faces filled with joy. "They tried to take this from us," he said, his voice trembling. "But we rebuilt, and we'll keep rebuilding." Ava nodded, moved by his resilience. "You're an inspiration," she said. "Your strength shows them they can't win." Not all encounters were uplifting. Some survivors struggled with trauma, their wounds both visible and invisible. Ava worked closely with mental health professionals to ensure they received the care they needed. She often reminded them, "Healing takes time, but you're not alone." As months turned into years, the impact of Ava's work became evident. Hate groups were no longer operating with impunity. Communities were better equipped to stand against them. Schools implemented programs teaching tolerance and empathy, and local governments invested in fostering inclusivity. The community center, fully rebuilt and thriving, became a beacon of hope. Its walls were adorned with murals celebrating unity, painted by local artists and children. Ava often visited, her presence a reminder of what they had overcome. One day, she attended a ceremony where a plaque was unveiled in her honor. It read, "In recognition of Ava James, whose courage and determination reminded us that justice is not passive, it is pursued." Standing beside Marcus, now a leader in his own right, Ava felt a deep sense of fulfillment. "This isn't about me," she said quietly. "It's about all of us." Ava's work didn't end with Orlov and Rex's downfall. She founded an organization dedicated to combating hate and supporting survivors. Through workshops, advocacy, and community-building initiatives, she continued to fight for a world where justice prevailed. As she wheeled through the bustling streets of her city, Ava felt a renewed sense of purpose. The battle against hate was far from over. But she knew one thing for certain. As long as there were people willing to stand up for what was right, justice would prevail. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please share it with your friends and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. In the meantime, I have handpicked 2 stories for you that I think you will enjoy. Have a great day.